Greetings, everybody. Once again, we're back to the Bob and Emil Show. Took a little one-week hiatus, but we'll be back throughout the rest of the season. And Emil, how are you doing tonight? Emil Cadlick, the publisher of Fantasy Sports Publications and Football Diehards. How are you doing this fine evening, sir?
Not bad. Been under the weather a little bit, but I feel good for at least another half an hour.
You look no worse for the wear. And I can say that because I do. Something we wanted to look into, and I think is kind of interesting, is where we stand right now going into week 6. We're well past the quarter pole, kind of hitting the third way through the season basically, and kind of see where we're standing with regard to some of the players we drafted as high-end producers or to be high-end producers, and kind of where we're at with those guys. I think that was the goal. And we'll start out by looking at the quarterbacks and kind of based on preseason expectations. And I think it's safe to say we all thought Pat Mahomes was a great quarterback too, with a lot of upside. Did we have any idea how much upside?
I don't think you can predict being the number one quarterback after 5 weeks. I think that's difficult to predict. And, I had him around 10 or 11. I kind of pushed him up a little bit, but I still felt worried about that. A guy with 1 week of NFL experience, albeit a year. But, that's why when you try and get that guy as a number 2 is what I tried to do a lot. I'd take a guy like I was taking Goff a lot, and then I'd try and get Holmes as late as I could. And those are the kind of things. You can't take the guy too early, and that's just the way it is. But you try and get him as your number 2 quarterback. That's what I tried to do.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of us did. We we drafted someone ahead of him, maybe we drafted him first, but we didn't draft him to be our starter. Obviously, you got off to a historic start over the first 4 games. Been very serviceable through 5 games, heading into a big shootout with New England. I think the thing that struck me that I kept thinking about, leading up to it, which made him a high upside guy for me was, in the NFL, there are 32 quarterbacks, right? There's 32 guys who take snaps from center, but there's not 32 actual quarterbacks, right? So if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you trade away a quarterback, a rare commodity, one that's taking you to the playoffs, no less, if you're not pretty sure you have the next thing waiting. And you look at Andy Reid's history as a coach and, in the football world for as long as he's been in, certainly he knows this. So I think that gave us some credence. If we look down the rankings here, one spot, Mahomes obviously number 1 right now. How surprised are you that Matt Ryan is your quarterback 2 right now?
I'm actually stunned, especially after week 1. I just had it up a minute ago, but his week 1 was bad. And I was sitting there after week 1, knowing they've got all that talent in Atlanta, thinking, oh my gosh, is this going to be that bad? But boy, did he bounce back. I'm really stunned he's the number 2 guy. And I did pick him in 1 league if I want to get personal about it, and I was not happy about it. And of course now I'm a lot happier about it. Yeah, he's showing some grit. Watching him on the field and he's got this attitude. I really think he's determined this year to try and make the playoffs and go as far as they can. What do you think?
Look, he's got a great set of weapons, and one of the things I wondered about him going into the season, we look back 2 years ago when he had the MVP season before last, had the MVP season. What happened, or what was the same, what's comparable from this year to that year? Well, he's in his second year with a coordinator. That MVP season, in 2015 or 2016 was with Kyle Shanahan, his second season. If you remember, the first season wasn't great. They didn't have that connection. So then we go the last year, Steve Sarkisian comes in, 2017, and it wasn't that great, and we all complained about it. But then coming in this season, you wondered, okay, so is this year the mind meld happens, that they get it together? Well, there's still some rough edges, I think, on this, right? I don't know that they have the full mind meld. I don't know if Steve Sarkisian is the play caller or ever will be the play caller that Kyle Shanahan is. He's still working, Julio Jones on pace for 2,000 yards, no TDs. You'd think they'd figure out a way to get him more involved in the red zone. But either way, the touchdowns are there. So I'm kind of thinking there's been a great deal of progress with this, especially for a team that hasn't run the ball as effectively as I thought they would with a good offensive line that hasn't been playing up to the level that up to my expectations. I think that's an issue.
And Calvin Ridley, has added that little frosting on the cake, whether we believe it or not.
Little touchdown mojo there. We'll see if he can keep that up. As we go down, the list here a little bit. Drew Brees, I don't think we were drafting him to be quarterback 3, but good on him for being there. It's not outside the realm of possibility. The same with Deshaun Watson coming back from the ACL. He's been pretty high end. He's got a good assortment. Jared Goff is the guy. I don't think any of us were really drafting him as a high-end quarterback one. He's number 5 right now.
Yeah, I was picking him a lot. I had him ranked around 8 or 9-ish, and I really wasn't expecting a lot more than that. Of course, he had that monster game, which, is filtered out a little bit, but he's continuing improving, and all of a sudden he's a top 5, and I don't really see him sliding too much. All of a sudden he's become a pretty darn good quarterback number 1, and I don't think that's going to change throughout the rest of the year.
All right, a couple guys that we were drafting pretty highly who haven't delivered yet. Carson Wentz, I think we saw last night or Thursday night game against the Giants. We saw him turn that corner, don't you?
Yeah, they're getting a little healthier. He's getting a little more of the rust being gone, getting things going, and I think he's now becoming a pretty darn good QB1 going further.
Another guy that we were, kind of worried about, it was Andrew Luck. We weren't sure if he was going to be the same guy. Clearly, he's throwing about, he's on a pace to shatter the record for attempts in a season that belonged to Matt Stafford. I think he's on pace for 700 and close to 750. How surprised are you at how much he's throwing and how well he's playing?
I'm a little bit surprised. I still thought it would take some time. They took him out of that one game for the bomb because, that made us worry that he didn't have the arm strength. Maybe that running game's not going. And he's of course, one game was an overtime game, which helped a lot. He's definitely doing better than I thought he would. I think it would take all year to come back and really be himself. And maybe the game mode has given him more opportunities to throw. He's number 9 right now. I still see him about there, plus or minus. I think he'll still be he's becoming a good QB1 right now.
Okay, a couple guys who have come up pretty small, aside from Cam Newton, who probably was well inside everybody's top 10, producing well outside it. I think maybe that'll start getting dialed in. Do you think Cam Newton can get it back together to the point, maybe start running a little more? I think we've seen signs of that. That would be the big hope for him.
Yeah, hopefully he'll get a little more running. And also, these rankings are not average. They're year-to-date, and they have a bye already. Not everybody's got a bye.
Right.
And I was too lazy to calculate, so he'd move up a little bit. But still, obviously, he's at 18, and a lot of us had him in the top 5, and he has been in the top 5. Yeah, and I still expect him to be a top 6 quarterback, and I wouldn't give up on him. And hopefully the running, he'll run a little more, and the running game in general. Hopefully that'll get him up. I haven't given up on him being a QB1.
Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers letting us down a little bit. Russell Wilson letting us down a little bit. Russell Wilson, 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. There's hope. Maybe?
Wow. Well, maybe with Baldwin back, and maybe that more can help. Oh, that was kind of weird. Three targets and 2 touchdowns. I'm worried about him. I'm just worried about him. A lot of the great games he had last year was in the fourth quarter where he racked up maybe a 25-30% of his, or more than that, of his performance as far as fantasy is concerned. That's a kind of a lot to ask for, although I don't want to. Man, it's so much fun to watch, and he's so good. But I got to believe he's going to do better than the 19th quarterback right now. But I'm worried he's going to be a top 6 quarterback, which is where we had him.
A lot of it was, last year, he was running more. He's not running as much. The Seahawks, and we maybe should have seen this. Maybe there was foreshadowing when Brian Schottenheimer, the run-heaviest play caller in the history of the world, and I might be exaggerating a little bit, but damn near, came in. The offensive line seems to be playing better. But I think one of the things that's missing from Russell Wilson's game is they're not in a position where he's having to scramble all around and do it because they're just running the ball more and they're running effectively. It seems like their offensive line's coming together. Maybe as that progresses and people have to start respecting that, things open up down the field a little bit. Maybe you get some playmakers. The one guy who is really getting it done that we kind of thought right about where we thought, Phillip Rivers. Steady Eddie Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, right around 10-ish. And he's had some pretty darn good. I'm surprised he's 10th. I thought he'd be a little bit higher, but there's been a lot of scoring going on this first 5 weeks. Exactly where you were. You can draft him late, and up to this point, he's had some really good games, some steady, like you said, steady games, and you can really take advantage of. You got a solid number one QB, and you took him really late in your drafts. I expect that to continue.
All right, when we look at the running backs, the guys we were drafting early on, Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara. When we kind of look at, how the top draft picks went, they're all kind of delivering. Melvin Gordon was in that top group when we were drafting. But there's some guys that are kind of, number one, Alvin Kamara right now, the number one back. Saquon Barkley's been phenomenal. If those guys were kind of, I think most every draft I was in, they were going 5, 6, 7, kind of right in that range, and one before the other, whichever one you like. Saquon Barkley right now on pace to outproduce Alvin Kamara's rookie season, which was good enough to be Offensive Rookie of the Year, by the way. And now for Alvin Kamara, currently the number one producer at the position, or right up there. Mark Ingram comes back, and we see in the first game back, Mark Ingram got the touchdowns. What should Alvin Kamara be thinking right now, Emil?
Wow, I mean, if I glance at the weeks, the first week Kamara had, do I have the right guy? 41 fantasy points, then he had 15 against Cleveland in week 2, 34, 41 in week 4, and 6. That last game, whatever it was, I forgot the day it was.
Right, it's Washington. It was a Monday night game.
Monday night, yeah. I was out of town. I was in an airport watching that game, so I got a little confused. That's a low floor, and that's, we all worried what's going to happen when Mark Ingram comes back, and God, that was a little more than I'd expected. It was just one game, but man, it was so much fun watching this guy just pour the numbers out the first 4 weeks. So I'm not sure what you do about it. You're just going to have to hope it equalizes, and he may not be getting 35 and 41 every game, but maybe he'll start getting 20-ish and still be useful.
We need to remember the numbers came last year with Mark Ingram out touching him. Talking to the people who follow the team on a daily basis, Mike Triplett from ESPN.com, who's pretty tuned in with the fantasy, does a lot of fantasy writing, but also covers the Saints. He expects it just to be a narrowed gap. He thinks maybe Ingram continues to out-touch him, but it won't be as big of a gap. That means Kamara has to be much more efficient again this year than a normal running back, and we'll see if he can pull that off. One of the worries about Ingram is, if you think about it like this, that the Saints have every reason to run the wheels off him. He's a free agent after this season, likely moving on. They're not likely to keep both. So maybe they get they try and burn as much tread off his tires as they can. So we'll see.
And who got the carries at the goal line? Mark.
Right, and I think that's going to continue. But Kamara is more than capable of scoring on those short passes. So my gut feeling here is Kamara owners, don't panic. It's one game, don't freak out. Give him a little time to normalize a little bit. Todd Gurley owners are not freaking out. Todd Gurley owners are feeling great right now. We kind of had, I think he was pretty much consensus number one in most of the drafts I was in. Le'Veon Bell right with him, maybe close behind, but Gurley went more often number one. This is almost as much about his coach and offense as it is about him. I mean, he's a talented player. But the role, the usage, and just the effectiveness of the offense are working heavily in his favor.
Yeah, you were worried something would change. There's so many different mouths to feed. You got Cooks coming in the game. Of course, you lost Sammy Watkins, but man, it did not change. It's gotten better. And of course, the beauty of that offense and of him being a pass catching and a runner, it just seems like one game he didn't run much and he ended up getting it. It just, the balance is there, and he's always putting the numbers up. He's really performing at where you expected him to, and giving up the number one pick, you got to hope he does pretty darn well. And I don't see it changing. He just looks fantastic.
Yeah, the usage as a receiver has been great. You think back 2 years ago playing under Jeff Fisher and that offense when he basically called it a grade school offense. Turns out he was right. Now he's playing in like a doctorate course offense, right? With Sean McVay calling the plays, they're averaging over 30 points a game. all the pieces are working, and he is the key cog in that. Melvin Gordon's another guy who has been delivering great production, super high-end production. It's a lot of it volume-based, though. Do you think he can keep his role going?
Well, right now he's number 3, and he was being drafted in the late first round, like about the 8th or 9th, maybe 10th running back. So he's overperforming from his forecasted draft slot. He's always worried me. It's just obviously not as good as a Gurley situation. I think he'll still be a solid RB1. I just don't think he'd be a top 3. That's asking a bit much, but I think that's fine. You know, being the 8th or 9th, ending up the 8th or 9th would be fine for his owners.
Yeah, Austin Eckler, horning in on the workload a little bit, but not to the degree that it's been a concern for anybody. A couple guys that really leap out at this point. David Johnson, a little lower than we expected, but seems to be getting on track. Carlos Hyde faring quite well in Cleveland in terms of touchdown scoring. Marshawn Lynch, I think, faring reasonably well, maybe better than expectations. But nobody is outperforming. Okay, I'm going to go with James Conner here, but for obvious reasons. But what about James White in New England?
Wow. Well, things set up for him with all the injuries, Rex, Burkhardt, etc. I don't know. He's 7th. I mean, but PPR, I just don't. I think he's going to continue to perform at a let's say low RB1. He's just the guys that drafted him, and I know they got him later. They're just soaking this up. You're just eating this guy up, and I don't think it's going to change. Sony is going to do his thing, but White's going to get the PPR. He may even get some of the goal line. He's the guy who you can rely on him, and he's got the talent, and you know what he can do, and he's not going to make mistakes.
Trusted target for Tom Brady. One of my concerns, though, is maybe as we get later in the year, the weather gets colder. Maybe they want to grind it out a little more with Michelle, which we've seen. They've leaned towards that. He had the 25-carry game against Miami, and he was in the game very late. Was Michelle against Detroit, even when they were behind. That hasn't kept James White from producing, though, and I think anytime you're one of Tom Brady's trusted targets, and James White is that, you're in really good shape. I think another guy that we all look, I remain skeptical, and I think we've seen it from Adrian Peterson. It's been up and down, but you got him for nothing. Yeah. And I'm trying to get over my, look, I see Adrian Peterson as a guy that, some games he will show up and have a great game. Next game he'll show up and get you less than 2 yards a carry, right? And we've seen some of this year. Some of it he got beat up against the Saints. But boy, for a team that really needed that kind of back, he's come in there and he's catching the ball well. I think he's on pace now for his best season as a receiver. How long do you think he can keep the role going?
Well, I kind of thought he wouldn't keep it up this long. I thought of course, he's got the shoulder issue, but hopefully that'll go away. Maybe this guy can do it for a significant amount of time. Of course, when you get into week 14, 15, and 16, the fantasy playoffs, maybe you're asking a lot for him to be still maybe a decent running back too. I worry about it, but I don't. I obviously they're going to use him. They don't have the talent there of anybody else. Maybe Chris Thompson, but he's a different kind of back. He's doing different things. I wouldn't run out and trade for him right now, but if you got him on your team, you just ride it and see how it goes. Unless somebody offers you something great for him.
Right. Some guys who have been a bit disappointing. Derrick Henry comes immediately to mind. The workload's been there. The production has not. Deion Lewis, getting his fair share. He hasn't been overly impressive either, but a little more so than Henry, which is not difficult. I mean, it's been crazy. The other guy I think that's come up a little bit short of what we expected. I mean, I mentioned David Johnson, but I think we were all expecting a hell of a lot more from Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, that's just an incredible situation. I guess that second half from 2017 was so nice, and we really thought he was going to get the touches, and it hasn't happened. Gore's getting more carries. He had that good game a week ago, but basically he got it as a receiver, and I just to be expecting him to be anything right now, even an RB 2.
Right.
You're just hoping.
It's hard to play him as a flex. It's hard to play him as a flex, even that workload. It seems like Adam Gase is satisfied not having a concerted effort to run the ball. Maybe that changes a little bit in Chicago this weekend, week 6. We'll see if they can maybe force run. You got a great pass rush. Ryan Tannehill questionable going into this game, so maybe that's a little bit of an issue. One more guy that's been kind of a disappointment is Alex Collins. And it's kind of surprising to me because Baltimore was so effective as a scoring unit. They were, through the first 4 games, they were almost unstoppable in the red zone. And Alex Smith hasn't been a big part of it. Do you see the workload increasing, or do you see an even split going forward with Buck Allen?
They're putting Buck Allen into the goal line more than I would thought they would. I think they're going to keep splitting it, unfortunately. It's working. They're playing well. I don't see why they would change it. I don't think there's something in the mechanism of why they did this the first 5 weeks and why they would change it. I think it's going to stay a split. He's still very effective, yet not as much as we'd like. I don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, I'm not feeling good about this either. Another guy that's kind of surprising that maybe we should have seen coming. We heard reports about it late in the summer. Dan Graziano of ESPN. We all expected Rashad Penny in Seattle to just move right in. And look, we're seeing that with a lot of the rookies, right? Whether it's Ronald Jones, Royce Freeman, they're having a little trouble establishing themselves. But Penny can't even get in the lineup. I mean, where he's behind Chris Carson and Mike Davis. Seattle's running the ball very effectively. Chris Carson has been tearing it up. Where do you see this going? Is Carson? I see Carson holding down the ship. A couple of things. This offensive line that we all thought was horrible seems to be coming together, and it's just this desire. They have made a shift to take some of the pressure off Russell Wilson, clearly, and put it on the running game, and Carson is running wild with it. If he stays healthy, I don't see him slowing down. Do you?
Well, he's got the experience. He's playing better. And, I just think the rookie, maybe he's just not ready. We don't really see the practices. They'd put him in there if he was ready. Sometimes these guys aren't ready for whatever it is, whether it's pass blocking or he's just not running well. Not everybody can be a Saquon Barkley, I guess. It takes time. Some guys take time, even at running back. Obviously, we hope for more, but it's not going to happen. I don't think if something happens late in the year, maybe during the fantasy playoffs, if they're out of it, let's say, and he's ready, maybe they start giving him more time. But I think, maybe you put him on a deep roster or you keep one eye out of him, but I'm not expecting anything to be dramatically changed this year.
Yeah, I'm holding on to all these guys. I think Royce Freeman, I see flashes of him looking like what they drafted him to be, that early down, every down back. I keep seeing Phillip Lindsay playing well, and I wonder how long he can hold it up. He's 190 pounds, but he's still getting it done.
He's fast.
I see this split going on until somebody forces them not to, and I think that's only injury or attrition that will do that. Ronald Jones, I think, has a chance just because Peyton Barber has been so disappointing.
Yeah.
Peyton Barber's done nothing with his opportunity. I'll remind you about all these guys is, remember Peyton Barber, this time last year, nobody was talking about Peyton Barber.
Yeah.
Peyton Barber came down the stretch and really came on strong. So don't be surprised. And every year, what happens every single year, Emil? Someone comes and wins you a title that either you didn't draft, you haven't been playing, has been sitting at the bottom of rosters, you picked up as a free agent. I mean, and we can go back over, recent time, Alex Collins last year, Justin Forsett. I mean, we could take it all the way back to like Ruben Droon, Zach Stacy, Sean Moreno. I mean, Dominic Davis. I mean, it goes all the way back over the course of time. The guys are going to do that. So some of these guys that we're not seeing the playing time that we want, there is still some hope for them. So if you have room on your rosters, I know I'm hanging on to some of these guys, and I'm hoping some of you are able to as well.
Good points.
All right, let's look at the wide receivers. Right now, Adam Thielen and Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins leading the way. Thielen, look, we were all, thought he was a star. I mean, you were drafting him maybe as a wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 2. He is in lockstep with Kirk Cousins to a degree. I mean, Stephon Diggs has still been phenomenal. I think a lot of people, it was kind of a decision between those two, as your high-end wide receiver 2. They're both delivering wide receiver 1 numbers.
Yeah, Diggs is even 8. Thielen's number 1. I can't believe how he's just he could catch anything. It's just hands are glue. And like you said, he's in sync with the new quarterback. I really, I drafted him a few times. I had him around 11th, like you said, low 1. high RB or wide receiver 2, I still worried about him. It's just like, is this not real? Is it going to fall apart, especially with the talent of Diggs and a new quarterback coming in? But it's just
500-yard games. I mean, number one, look at that. I think one of the advantages for Thielen is he's the big slot guy. He plays out of the slot. He doesn't draw the top cover guys that some of these other receivers are dealing with, because he's mostly running out of the slot, or running a lot out of the slot, and I think that works in his favor. Michael Thomas, the roll has slowed. Are you concerned about this, or did we just get spoiled from the double-digit catches and the touchdown every week, and now it's normalized a little bit, and maybe we're getting a more realistic expectation?
Well, you didn't have Mark Ingram there, and they definitely went to him early on because he was open, and things are changing a little bit. I don't know if Traquan Smith's really going to do what he did every time. That was kind of a blown coverage on one of those. I think you can't expect him to be getting that number one situation where he was getting, I don't have it in front of me, 8, 9, 10 catches or more.
Right.
That can't happen. They're going to go, they're smart. I mean, people are going to double and triple. They're going to throw to these other people. Then it's going to edge out. They're going to have to move the defenses around. I still think he's a very solid wide receiver 1, and obviously, but you just got to enjoy those big games when he has them, and you can't expect them. But like Thielen, it really helps your team when every third game or so you get this 100-yard game, and it really bolsters your points and maybe gets you a win where you wouldn't have got a win. But it's going to slow down a little, but it'll bounce around.
We talked about Todd Gurley. We all expected him to have a good year. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, all all inside the top 21 right now. Cooks is 21. Woods up higher than that. Kupp well higher than that. I mean, I don't see this offense slowing down.
No.
And I think from week to week it's going to be hard to figure out which of those guys is going to be wide receiver 1. But if you could only have one, is it Kupp?
Yeah, I think it is Kupp. Which stuns me, it's an interesting. You go back to the draft. This is what's fun about what we're doing, is go back and look at that draft, and a lot of the fear is, he did really well as a rookie, but you got these talented players, like Cooks and Woods. Woods is a little worrisome, but then you got all the catching by the running backs, and hopefully we're talking about using their tight ends a little more. And you're thinking, when can I take this Kupp? And I think people must have him rated into the mid-30s, which is of a wide receiver. It's more like a wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of hard to think, do I really expect this guy to bump into maybe a wide receiver 2? Right now he's obviously a wide receiver 1. Whether that's going to change. He had the huge game. Again, these guys are having huge games, so it's great. Maybe he does. He gets you 10 or 12 or 15 one week, and maybe he gets you 11 the other week, and next thing you know, he's getting you 30. So you just ride the wave. But he's definitely impressed and surprised me. I didn't, obviously, if I expected him to be a top 10 receiver, I would have drafted him a lot more and a lot sooner than I did. But it's hard. It's good to think back.
Second-year guys.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you got to fade there. You have a couple second-year guys like Kupp who are coming on strong as well. Maybe surprisingly, I think we all had high hopes for Juju Smith-Schuster after a solid rookie season. I think we all had high hopes for Kenny Golladay, just given his, the physical stature and what his abilities seemed if he could stay healthy. Both of those guys are surprisingly productive. Smith-Schuster closing in on the top 10, still behind Antonio Brown, but not by much, right?
Oh, he's had some huge games, and we all liked him. But the problem I had a lot in the drafts I was in is people were taking him just a little earlier than I wanted to.
Right.
Now, remember, Le'Veon Bell, the gorilla in the room, elephant in the room, whatever, what's going to happen with him could really affect Juju Schuster, his performances. It's going to be hard for him to be even close to what he was doing.
Because if Bell comes back as Le'Veon Bell, he is the de facto wide receiver 2, or that's his argument. That's why he's, basically holding out, because he expected to be, he expects to be paid in a special way because he's a special player. I wonder if Smith-Schuster has kind of put the kibosh on that, at least in terms of where Pittsburgh's at, saying, why would we do that? Because, we have a wide receiver too, and his name's Juju Smith-Schuster, and he's damn good. Kenny Golladay, I think look, Detroit is capable. They had both Marvin Jones and Golden Tate 1,000-yard receivers last year. Jones is kind of the guy, and you would have maybe expected a little bit. Tate's role staying the same, maybe Marvin Jones diminishing a bit because Kenny Golladay kind of fits that big body, deep threat. Jones not a huge guy, Golladay is, but still kind of fills his role, right?
Yep, I think you're right, and we were all worried about how they were going to take these three guys, and Golladay, 17th, he's a mid-wide receiver too, and you probably draft him as a fourth receiver, yeah. So that's worked out for you. And I think that's going to continue to some point. You still are mixing up Jones in there, but I think Golladay is going to really help some players, fantasy players, through the rest of the year. He's going to stay there.
Before the season, I think we all, I know for me, we looked at the rookie receivers, and we don't get too excited about them in general because they often struggle. They, don't put out high catch totals. I like DJ Moore a little bit than I like Calvin Ridley because it seemed like he had a clearer path to a workload. I mean, there's Devin Funchess and not a lot else. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, sure, he's a contributor. Greg Olsen, he's a contributor. But Moore has done little and next to nothing. Calvin Ridley, it's been a lot of it based on touchdowns, right? Which is very hard to predict and sustain. But he seems to be a really great fit for Atlanta's offense, especially with the complementary abilities. Julio Jones drawing coverage, Mohamed Sanu working the slot. It's really made for a great opportunity for Ridley.
It sure has. You've got the running backs too that catch the ball. You got a tight end that catches the ball. You got to guard Julio. And he has talent. Ridley has talent. And they've been able to use that in these last couple of games. I think, he started out learning. It's going to be up and down, but I just think they're going to continue to get, how do you not double team Julio most of the time or put your best guys on him? I don't know how you do that. So that's going to give Ridley continue to have opportunities. Maybe not as many, but
right. Kind of the notion going into this whole thing was he's a really great fit for Matt Ryan because he's runs the great route runner. Matt Ryan likes to throw the timing routes. Steve Sarkisian knows, from college at Alabama, knows Ridley. Ridley knows the scheme and the routes. So it all made some sense. I think I want to talk about one more guy here for sure that I think I was interested in. I drafted a heck of a lot, but is starting to live up to everything I expected is John Brown in Baltimore. Talk a little bit about where, his role in your estimation. I mean, certainly we weren't drafting him to play at the level he's playing now. I mean, we didn't have those expectations.
Well, obviously he's got the speed. He's staying healthy. And watching, I think it was a Monday night or a Sunday night, so we got a lot of look at him. He really blew by those defensive backs.
Right.
And Flacco is an interesting guy because he's had a tough couple of years. Now he's got pressure on him with Lamar Jackson. God, all of a sudden he looks like he's starting to, maybe he woke up. Maybe he was being a little lazy. I don't know. But I think this John Brown's going to continue. Let's hope he stays healthy. Small guy, but I think he's going to continue to get the targets and be a very, very solid. I don't know where he is in here. He's not hugely high, but he's certainly he's 23rd. He's
outplaying expectations. Certainly outplaying expectations. Nobody drafted him to be a wide receiver too.
He's almost a free player.
Right. You were drafting Michael Crabtree maybe as a wide receiver 3 or 4. He's got have problems with drops. The thing you mentioned that is the thing that's the best about Brown. He runs past guys. When he's playing, he's the fastest guy in the field. We'll see this week at Dory Jackson, a pretty fast cover guy for Tennessee. But Brown, for the most part, runs by guys. But one of the things I liked about him this summer, and one of the reasons I drafted him a lot in best ball, is Joe Flacco's a big arm guy. We didn't see it last year. His depth of target was very shallow because he had no faith in his wide receivers. When he has faith in his wide receivers, he will throw deep with the best of them, and we've seen a little of that, although it's kind of tailed off the last couple of weeks, and we didn't need to see that, but it happened, so what are we going to do? And I think the same, another guy, just one more that's a little surprising, is Jordy Nelson. well, easily outproducing Amari Cooper. I don't know if anyone's really surprised that Amari Cooper's coming up short. I mean, we have high hopes for him based on his draft capital invested in him, but we've only seen spike games. We haven't seen sustained effort from him. Nelson looks like he could outproduce Cooper the rest of the season, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. He's still, I don't think he's as fast as he was, but he's still such a smart player. He knows where to go. He knows how to catch the ball. Him and his quarterback are in sync. I think 2 weeks ago, was it, when they barely won a game, they should have lost, and I unfortunately didn't look it up. But I don't know if you remember, late in the game, 4th down, they were about the 20-yard line, and Carr threw to Cooper, and he was supposed to read the defense, and he turned left in the end zone right and ran into the defender when he should have turned right, and Carr threw it there, incompleted pass, and Carr was mad. And that's frustrating. You got a guy named Cooper who's supposed to be a seasoned veteran. That's something that Jordy Nelson would do with his eyes closed. He would have made the right move. And all you got to do is turn right instead of left, because there's the defender, and you went the wrong way. That worries me. That's a sign that maybe Cooper is just not who we thought he was. He may have some talent, but go ahead.
I think one of the things that I thought was interesting, we talked to Josh Hirschmeyer, the Air Yards guy on Twitter, Frisco Josh, and he talked about he's studied all the next gen stats, and before the season he was talking about Jordy Nelson. He checked all the stats last year, and in terms of speed, Jordy Nelson hasn't really lost his speed. He was pretty much as one of the faster guys last year. He just, whether it was coverages or schemes or injuries or whatever. So he expected a big year from him this year, and I thought that was interesting that he said that before the season, just based on, we all thought that Jordy Nelson lost a step, and by all of us, I mean the Packers.
Yeah.
They're not letting him go. So let's look at the tight ends here real quick before we wrap it up tonight. I think I don't know if there's like huge surprises here. I think one of the things that, is a little, Rob Gronkowski drafted certainly 1, 2, 3 in that range. The other guys drafted in the top 3 are there. Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce. Ertz leading the way. Kelce right up against him. Gronk down at number 6. Are we complaining about Gronk yet? Are we worried about this? Seems like maybe all the pieces coming together in New England. We now have Julian Edelman back. We've got the rushing game dialed in. Josh Gordon is now there. Do they maybe have the kind of pieces? It seemed early to me that the coverage is, you looked at some of those games, the Jaguars really blanketed them. A lot of teams were really putting a lot of effort on shutting down Gronk. I think that's going to get a little harder going forward.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. It's fun to watch New England, how they evolve from week 1 to week 17. If they can get Gordon going, which I think they will, and obviously Edelman back, like you said, it's going to relieve some pressure from Gronk, and that's going to get him open more. But I really still believe that Ertz and Kelce are going to outperform him this year. But he's still. I think what's interesting at this point, other than guys like Cook, who may or may not be consistency, Ebron, he's playing well with the other guy being out for a while, Doyle being out.
Right.
But that level at 3, basically, when you're drafting, and a lot of times I don't want to spend a high pick on Kelce or Ertz, and then you're just fighting tight ends the rest of the year. Maybe it's worth picking one of those guys because they're consistent, at least.
I that's usually been my case. I'm an early tight end drafter. I want one of those elite guys. This year I got Gronkowski an awful lot. I'm hoping he comes around. It's been disappointing up to this point. You got Ertz, you're not disappointed, and I think that will carry on even more as once it gets more effective. I don't think Travis Kelce's slowing down. Ebron will slow down at some point. Jared Cook, this is the first time he's played 5 decent games. Cook has always been that guy. 4 games in a season is all you get out of him. You don't know when they're coming. He's like the perfect best ball guy by the quarter of the year. We'll see. The role has changed for him, though, clearly. With John Gruden as the head coach there, he's a focal point of the passing attack.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. You want to check your pulse. Is this really the guy? That first game was insane. His targets are insane. As a matter of fact, a couple games ago, they were like second down at the 2 or 3. I'm thinking, okay, Lynch, let's get that. Boom, he threw to Cooks. They called back the touchdown, and then they threw. It was then I think they had a penalty. They threw to Cooks again, And I'm like, finally, they ran it with Lynch and he scored. But, man, they are relying on Jared Cook. And
Yes.
I don't, obviously Jordy's starting to play well. They probably love to mix it up, but I think you're gonna be so lucky to have Jared Cook. He can't continue to this, but he could be definitely a top 6 tight end going forward, and you're just gonna enjoy using him.
Right, our guy Justin Lanero on the Football Diehards pod always talks about it, the sea of mediocrity, as he calls the tight end position, and we all have to swim in it. And this year, I mean, it's a wide. You can cut a wide swath and still get guys that are capable. George Kittle is a top 5 right now tight end. I don't know that changes much with C.J. Beathard in. They played college football together, although they did not play much together because Kittle was hurt a fair amount. But still, friends on and off the field and having some history. Kyle Rudolph playing about to the level we expected. Jimmy Graham inside the top 10, although it hasn't been as exciting as we want. But Austin Hooper at number 9. He's been getting pretty good volume. It's been a little surprising to me. Can he keep going in an offense with that many guys at wide receiver that are going to be effective?
I don't think so. I think his floor is going to happen a lot where he's going to get some really bad games. Then again, it is the tight end position, but I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to have problems with some low floors personally.
Trey Burton is a guy that we had high hopes for. I mean, I think he's playing about the level where he was drafted or expected to play at. I had questions about Trey Burton. You're bringing him in. They call it the U tight end. It's the position that Travis Kelce plays, kind of a hybrid receiver tight end. Chicago, when Matt Nagy went there, that was one of the first things he talked to the GM about was, hey, Ryan Pace, I need this guy in my Travis Kelce position. And Burton was the guy they got. I thought, okay, I trust the role. Do I trust the guy?
Yeah.
Maybe right now I kind of mistrust both because I think the offense is still developing. Part of that's Mitchell Trubisky. It seems to be heading in the right direction, but maybe they're using Taylor Gabriel more to create mismatches than they are the tight end. We're seeing flashes of it, though.
Yeah.
How encouraged are you or disappointed?
I was disappointed at the beginning because they hardly use him in the first game, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I got him in a couple leagues anyway. They're getting better. Trubinsky's playing better. He's a young player. Maybe the second half of the season, come fantasy playoffs, this guy, instead of the number 10 or 11 or 12, maybe he sneaks in there in the 6, 7, and 8. But you may have situations. Njoku is a guy who maybe can start to perform at that level with the new quarterback. O.J. Howard's been out for a while. I've seen him in a couple of my leagues dropped. He may be a guy you can get, and maybe he ends up being better than Burton. These guys may end up being better than Burton in the second half of the year. Because as you said, it's a sea of mediocrity. Maybe one of these guys is going to get hotter than Burton, and you may want to watch these guys. But yeah, I'm not sure. I have my doubts.
There's basically like 500 guys I'd be fine streaming. No, not 500, but a hell of a lot. I mean, it really, if it comes down to it, C.J. Uzomah right now is a viable play. I think Virgil Green, if you need Cameron Brate in Tampa Bay with Jameis Winston coming back, as a guy that maybe gets some looks.
How long do you think Howard is going to be out?
I think he might return this week, although, we hear that sometimes these guys with the sprained knees. We heard it with Evan Ingram this week that he was close and that he didn't make it back. We're on the early side of Howard. This is the second week, so it seems pretty close to me. So it might be another week. But Brate, I think, either way, there's, only 2 tight ends the last 2 years have had more touchdowns than him, Jimmy Graham and Kyle Rudolph. So, I mean, he's a capable scorer, and he has Jameis Winston's attention. So that's an interesting thing. We lost a couple guys who are super good. Will Dissly, the rookie from Seattle, who we all expected to have a huge season, right?
Wow.
Right. I mean, the Diss missile comes firing into the tight end world, shakes everything up. Maybe some guys that haven't done as well as we expected. Ricky Seals-Jones has been heavily targeted at times, hasn't come through.
Yep.
Both Pittsburgh tight ends are playable. I like Vance McDonald right now, but Jesse James is still on the field a fair amount and getting it done. And Jordan Reed has the bones removed in his toes to keep healthy, but it's somehow taken away his production. is Reed going to come around at some point?
I say no. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, he should. We all look behind ourselves at how great he was. I'm not going to put a lot of stock in it. I've got him in a couple leagues. I'm holding on to him, but I'm looking at these other guys, like you're saying. I may even pick up Brait this week and play him, this week and see how it goes. But something
I liked about him was Alex Smith has always had an affinity for the tight ends. Has used them heavily. Just not quite clicking yet for him. And I think that's the thing. Greg Olsen comes back this week. Are you eager to play him while he's still in the locked and upright position? Because I wonder. Second fracture is the same bone in his foot the second time. The screw kept them from needing to do new surgery, but is that really going to mean he can hold up well? Or
I wouldn't start him the first week he's back. I would not start him. I wait and watch and see what he does, unless you're desperate, obviously. And we'll see how that goes. It worries me. It would be. You'd have to be desperate to put him in right now, but you can pick him up and watch him for a week if you got the positions. Also, the Swaim guy for Dallas is starting to catch balls.
As a matter of fact, now that you mention it, I was talking about him earlier today, and he is a guy because they have no real wide receiving core, no high end. I'm being mean, but the high end receiving core is not there. Swaim and Ezekiel Elliott kind of have by default become the primary downfield threats because the other guys just aren't getting it done. But
as you said, you're looking for guys. We're looking for guys, and we just mentioned 4 or 5 guys that you gotta watch unless you're lucky and have a really solid tight end.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll call this one a night. We'll be back next Friday to do this. In the meantime, tons of stuff on the website, including this video where you found this. We'll have more coming throughout the weekend, right up through kickoffs. We'll have the live videos with Armando Marsal and Bobby Gomez in the hour leading up to kickoff. Catch me on the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio every single day, 6 to 8, football diehards, and on NFL radio Saturday nights, 8 to 11. Tons of content on the site, whether it's Armando, Bobby Gomez, Justin Lanero, John Lobb, Gary Davenport, Jen Ryan. Get her DFS season-long Vegas Excel file every week. I find it indispensable. I keep it open at all times. Is a great piece of work by her every week. So hit the site, get the stuff. Brad Cruz's sit-start will be up for the Sunday games on Saturday. I'll be doing an injury overview, and so check us out, and we'll catch you next week on the Bob and Emil Show.
Wonderful.